I was in Euro last week, and the crowd's go crazy. All you motherfuckers just stand there. Move.
Welcome to the Riff Crew. I'm your host, Steve Mitchell, back for another big episode here in the realm. And joining me, as always, is the man who is both a gentleman and a scholar. Skull, how you doing, mate?
Hey, greetings, ladies and gentlemen, Cyberland. As you know, this is Skull broadcasting from the past, present, and future in the Chamber of the Cosmos. Here with my good friend Steve Oz from Ozland. I'm an on-again, off-again DC bomb rock band Black Manta. I've been in the scene for over 35 years now. And so I know people from all over the scene. I also worked at the Smithsonian for 20 years. And so I've incorporated my love and passion for history with my love and passion for music. As usual, really excited to be here. And we have a very special guest with us here today. As usual, it's a real honor to have him on here with us. One of the godfathers of the fantasy genre. He's also a lyricist and member of Hawkwind and Blue Oyster Cult, and creator of Elric and the Eternal Champion multiverse, and Mr. Michael Moorcock. It's great to have you here again in a segment that we call Eternal Tales of Michael Moorcock. So just glad to have you here.
It's great to be here, Skull.
It's good to see you again. I just wanted to start off the show by saying I want to dedicate the show to a dear friend of mine and a brother of mine, Jeffrey Francis, who unfortunately passed away. He was a group of us guys that we played games at RPG Central. You know, we played Stormbringer and of course the first edition, the legendary first edition of Deities and Demigods. But he passed away recently, and he was a massive fan of yours. So I'd like to dedicate this show
to
thanks.
Him. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, he was a great guy. I also want to remind everybody out there just of who you are. You know, Michael Moorcock, you know, one of my literary heroes, one of the grandmasters of the fantasy genre. You were during the birth of the genre from the very beginning. You influenced a generation of fantasy writers and filmmakers, comic books, and role-playing games for over 60 years now. But a lot of people don't know that you're also a huge music fan, so that we kind of talk a little bit about your literary stuff, but we like to focus and talk about your love of music. So,
Well, there's a new one just out, which I forgot to bring. I'm sorry to say. I can go and get it in a minute if we start to falter. Which is the final record of the End of All Songs, which Spirits Burning have done with Cleopatra. Have you got a copy?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, perfect. I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pleased with it. I mean, I didn't have anything to do with the actual making of it, as it were. I just performed on it. But Don Falcon was really the guy whose inspiration it was. And he is
all three of them here. There's that one.
Yeah.
This is the second
There's
one.
four
here.
actually. We got
and
three.
This is part one.
Oh yeah, that's part one. Yeah, it's part two that's out now. The final part of End of All Songs. So I'll drag that over in a minute and show you. I've got the 12-inch over there. I can see where it is. And I've also recently done a cover of Motorhead by Lemmy, which Cleopatra says, but I mean I don't think so. But Cleopatra says it's actually better than Lemmy.
That's quite a compliment.
Well, people in these parts in particular, you know, happen to hear it, were extremely surprised to hear me doing what's essentially a heavy metal song, and belting it out. I've done others as well for Cleopatra, which are perhaps a little more melodic and less heavy. I've covered The Green Fly and the Rose by Bob Calvert, which is one of my favorite songs of his anyway, so I was glad to do that. These are just things I've been asked to do, mostly by Alan Davey, who tends to work with Cleopatra to produce albums. I've also covered one of my own records, my first single actually, called Star Cruiser, which I think I did in the very early 70s. But it didn't come out, I don't think, until about 1980, something around that time. We had to steal the tape from my former manager, who had hung on to it, but never, it was actually it was a weird thing, because I did the demo, which is what it was, for I forget exactly, but anyway, it was shown to Universal, and Universal liked it, and I was surprised, and I thought I was going to lunch to discuss with the A&R man there my putting out the single, and halfway through the lunch, he said, when are we going to have your first album? And I had never planned on an album. I mean, I'd really just done the single for fun as much as anything. So I had to work very quickly to put a band together to make. And it was actually a 3-album contract, but I lost interest in working with that particular company. So I never did do the other 2 albums, but it came out as New World's Fair, and then it was done in a preferred version some years later as Roller Coaster Holiday.
Was that Deep Fix?
Yes, yeah. The Deep Fix project was mostly it was mostly me, and then I'm a bit like Dave Brock, and then over the generations, different musicians. But I've worked mostly with Pete Pavley, who I still plan to work with. He wants me to do a couple of songs for him on an album that he's making, so I'm going to do that. Pete Pavley was in High Tide, which is an extremely good band.
I love High Tide.
Oh, do you? Yeah. Well.
Oh, yeah. Sea shanties, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. Yeah. It's surprising how many people do like it, but of course they never made it into become a really commercial band. So they split up around the same time that he joined me on New World's Fair, and I didn't know him. I asked Simon House if he knew a cellist, because I wanted a cellist on the album, and he said, yeah, as a matter of fact I do, because Simon had been with them too. So Pete came and played cello on New World's Fair, and since then we've become very close friends. He lives in Wales now, and he's put out several albums. I think a couple at least by his daughter, who's got a very nice voice. Just basic cottage industry, rock and roll, as it were. And but what he is primarily these days is a potter, and he makes exquisite pottery. I mean, really fine pottery. He also was a bookbinder for a short while and made these beautiful bindings. Awesome. He's just one of those people with lots of skills and artistic inspiration, and so he's and I just recently introduced him to another friend of mine who by sheer coincidence again has moved to a village called Borth in near Aberystwyth in Wales, and that's Rhys Hughes. Rhys Hughes mostly publishes with small presses. He doesn't like publishing with big houses, and he's done a huge number of books. Very, very interesting writer. One of which, and he likes sea shanties too. When I told him that he was now a neighbor of Pete's, he was delighted. He'd only just been playing sea shanties, and as he agreed that that if they'd had another couple of years, they probably would have been pretty big, but they split up really before that kind of thing started to catch on. So it's a, you know, it happens to other bands as well. But anyway, Pete and I have been working together with totally uncommercial projects. I mean, really just completely uncommercial things, because we both like modern classical music, as you know, as well as modern popular music. So we've tended to use as much influence from say Schoenberg and the like as we have from popular music influences. And he has a degree in music, Pete. His girlfriend got tired of him hanging around the house when he wasn't working and said, "Why don't you do something?" So he went and got himself a degree in music as a cellist. And then when he'd finished, his girlfriend left him. So it's
That's a ghost, yeah.
But I think it was to his advantage.
So
Anyway,
I was going to say Simon House was actually, he was in High Tide for a while, and then he ended up in Hawkwind.
Yeah, and David Bowie as well. And he did quite a lot of stuff with David Bowie. So and he also what he did. I mean, this is sort of weird, but when I was doing the first Deep Fakes album, I wanted the parts written out as music, not just not just done by ear, as it were. I'm not sure why I did this, but Simon did all the parts for that as well. He wrote them all. He made the most money out of that album, I think, altogether. And he recently died, unfortunately. He's a nice guy. I think he it was strange. His sort of story arc, as it were. He became a transsexual, and so I'm not sure now whether people still call him he, but I'm not sure whether I should be calling him she or not. So I'm confused, as one often is when one's friends suddenly change sexual identity. And it's not so much people you know from a distance. That's easy. You don't have any problem with. But when you've known somebody close to you for as she or he for a while, then it gets hard to remember what to call them. So, and I've got quite a lot of transsexual friends. It's Nicola Griffith, who's a lesbian science fiction writer, who I think lives up somewhere in the west, on the west coast. She believes that along with other people, that science fiction tends to attract the unconventional kind of person.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, so there's a whole range of different, which is very good. I was just thinking about my friend Tom Dish the other day. The guy, I mean, you might, if you haven't read him, you should. He's a very, very good writer, who shot himself it's a long time ago now. I mean, surprisingly long time ago, on July the 4th, about 20 years ago. He had a very unhappy life. I mean, towards the end, he had an unhappy life the last few years. His partner died of cancer, and they were very close. I mean, they'd been close for 30 years, I think, at least. And because there's no gay marriage in New York, certainly at that time. I don't know if there is now, actually, or not. The landlord was using that as an excuse to evict Tom because the lease was in Charlie's name. And so Tom was, he was the same age as me, pretty much exactly the same age as me. We'd been friends since the 60s. And so he wasn't really in a state to change, and it was going to cost an infinitely larger, not infinite, but a huge amount of money more than he was paying, because he was paying a controlled rent, as you can in New York. And so there were a lot of factors. Those weren't the only ones, but there were a huge number of factors sort of pushing him to depression, which he was given to anyway. He'd often go into very deep depressions, and one day we learned that he'd killed himself, and I almost didn't believe it, because I'd never really believed that he would, if you know what I mean. I thought he was being melodramatic, but unfortunately he wasn't. Anyway, enough of that.
Well, I was going to say, kind of a segue to that is, like, you witnessed a lot, the counterculture and, many different kinds of, like, cultural revolutions during the 60s and 70s. And you were there during the sexual revolution. You saw, and Hawkwind in a way kind of, they were there for that too. I mean, there was all kinds of different people that came out, and
absolutely, yeah. I also knew quite a number of as it were, prominent writers in the women's movement. Kate Miller.
It was a dangerous time to come out, but it took a lot of courage. But a
yes,
lot of people,
did.
they still did. They still came out.
Yeah, they did, and of course they did have the counterculture backing them, which helped. I mean, it's good to have, So, I think it was the right time to do it. I think the reaction in recent years, not many years, has been terrible. And I don't think you can. I don't think you can stuff all that back into the closet, as it were. Now, once it's happened, but it's a bad time for people who are, if you like, eccentric, to the common culture, particularly in places like the Midwest, which happily I've never lived in. I must say, I say that because somebody we made friends with has just come from that part of the world, and some of the laws there are just incredibly old-fashioned and well, deeply conservative. So anyway, Texas is liberal compared with a lot of the other places people live.
Well, so I wanted to ask you. You said you mentioned the new the Alan Davey album. Do you know when it's going to come out or anything like that?
No, I'm not quite sure. I know that Cleopatra wanted my contribution in a hurry. That was just one song on the album, which is a orchestral album. That he does a series called Orchestral, which are usually identified with Hawkwind.
Yeah, I have one right here.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Right, that's Alan, and he's a great bloke to work with. I've always liked him. I've known him since he joined Hawkwind, and the last live gig I ever did was one where he appeared too, and Nick Turner. It was the one we did in Austin. Can't remember how many years ago now. I mean, it seems like yesterday, but I'm getting to that age where time speeds up rather horribly.
Well, we're gonna get him on the show one of these days. It would be great.
Yeah, it would be good to have Alan on. I mean, as I say, and maybe Pete Pavley as well, because if you know High Tide and you know the other stuff that he's done, then and he's also, we've worked together for such a long time that I'm sure he's got a lot of interesting stuff to tell you.
Oh yeah.
And
would you like to show us the Spirits Burning album? Would you like to grab that?
Oh yeah, I'll go and get it. Excuse me, I won't be a minute. I've got to cross the vast expanse of the living room. Right, just checking. Is it still 2025, or have I lost another year?
No, no,
Okay.
no. It's still 2025.
You never can tell.
You've
Um,
gone through
I,
a time vortex.
well, I'm writing a series with Mark Hodder. A friend of mine lives in Spain. Excuse me for this. Yeah, I think I'm all right. And it's about time fluctuation. I mean, it's actually got, they're kind of Elric books, but they're based on the character that I based Elric on when I first started doing Elric. So these are, and also another series, which you might not know because the book didn't, I don't think it got very much distribution. It was called The Metatemporal Detective. And it's about metatemporals. They can move through time. And they're usually mystery stories set in, set in time.
Well, I'm reading this trilogy right now.
Oh,
That
yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm reading this along with the albums, and this
Yeah.
has a lot to do with time travel as well.
Absolutely, yeah. That's slightly more conventional than what we're doing at the moment. But
Okay.
I'll show you the book in a minute. I've got the first one's due out next month, I think. This is the album. Can you see it all right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Awesome.
I haven't got a CD with me, or this is probably filling up the whole screen. I can't, or not filling up the whole. Filling too
No,
much.
it's awesome.
Yeah, that's the back of it. It's a very nice cover and got a lot of good people on it. So that's one project that's going to. I think that comes out or came out the end of August, I think.
Oh,
Um,
okay. I'll check
yeah,
it out.
and this is the book that's coming out next month, which is the Albino Secret. Can you see the?
Yeah, uh-huh.
See it all right? It's the first of a 3-book series which Mark and I have written about Seton Begg, the metatemporal detective, and his archenemy Zenith the albino, who I based Elric on when I was 20, I suppose, who'd always been my favorite arch villain in the Sexton Blake series. And so it's a sort of it is science fiction, I think, without any doubt. Well, yeah, I guess it is. And it's about time and people who habitually move through time and often don't remember that they've moved through time, so they get horrible shifts of identity and stuff like that going on.
We're
But
moving
we've
through time right now.
well, we are, yes, but rather in a rather linear way. This isn't very linear. This is extremely non-linear.
Right, right.
Anyway, it's the people at Sound and Schuster really like it. I mean, the staff liked it and so on. So I think they're keener on that than anything else I've done. So and I like it too. I mean, because I've in a sense, because I'm writing it with somebody else, I had a chance to see it more from a distance, and so I'm always curious to see what Mark's done, and Mark has done a great deal of good stuff in the series. We're writing the last one now, which I suppose will come out next year or the year after. I'm not sure. And it's all well. Anyway, I'm very keen on them. They're a lot of fun. I mean, they're surprisingly, they get surprisingly metaphysical, but they're predominantly adventure stories and mystery stories. The first one's set in 1933, after the Nazis have taken over, although it's not set in Germany, it's set in mostly in Turkey and Romania. And the second one is suddenly got out of my head. The second one's set during the Russian Revolution, the early part of the Russian Revolution. Lots of troikas having to race through snow and wolves howling after them and all that sort of stuff. And the third one is actually set in my lifetime, which is during the Christine Keeler affair, which you might not remember, but it was a big scandal, a political scandal in the 60s, 64, I think. And it involved various high-ranking government ministers. I mean, these are things that you could probably do nowadays, certainly in America, and get away with. But in those days, governments fell.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the last one, and that one is really it's very strange because Mark's quite a bit younger than me, so it shows you what happens in a lifetime where language can change, as well as all sorts of other minor changes can take place, because a lot of it's set around Portobello Road and Ladbroke Grove, where I lived. I lived there since 61, I think, full time. And he was born in I think it was 64. He was born in 64. So his stuff is all done on research, whereas mine's done on memory. And he has a very different Portobello Road to the one that I remember, because it's changed quite a bit since then, and also language has changed. It's changed in America and in England, and it's usually English America, England, where words, usually quite minor words, just context change. It's about the same. I mean, we seem to swap. We're, what is it? Two nations united, separated by a common language, and it's just sort of interesting to see Mark doing a bit of, say, dialogue set in the 60s, when I know that people didn't actually speak like that in the 60s. Just very, very minor stuff. Like we used to say, we always used in for he lives in Ladbroke Grove, whereas now the American on, he lives on Ladbroke Grove, has taken over in England completely as a phrase, as it were. It's funny to get to my age and see all this stuff happening. I've got a friend who's older than me and still incredibly smart and very lively. He does lectures on YouTube and stuff. He's an academic, and we both kind of talk about this a bit, in that it just seems impossible that he's nearly 90, and I'm getting there, and it just doesn't seem likely that it's very hard to understand that we are that age, and so much has changed. Unfortunately, not necessarily for the better. I think a huge amount. You were talking about this. I'll get back to subject. The 60s and 70s were a huge period of change, and a great deal of of important changes made for minorities, but in particular. But the backlash on that, which I suppose started in the 90s, really, and into the present century, has been horrible. I honestly don't think it's been driven by a majority of people. I think it's been driven by a relatively large minority, and for but it's a minority that can sort of tip the balance.
Agree.
So it's very depressing to have spent all my life celebrating change and warning of things that can go wrong, as it were, and to find that's all happening. All the stuff I warned about is suddenly happening. It's the only consolation I've got there is that have lived through, I lived through the time when I've got a book which I came across the other day, and it's the Un-American Activities report on California, and it's a Californian Un-American Activities, whatever they're called, bureau, or whatever they were, and it's horrible what they were doing then to all kinds of people, and that was going on into the 60s until about Kennedy. Kennedy, the election of Kennedy made us all a lot more hopeful, I think, even though he may well have turned out to have been a disappointment. He probably, for his reputation, he was probably, I don't mean to, but he was probably assassinated around the right time, because I suspect he would have become more conservative. And LBJ, for all his support of the war, was much less conservative than Kennedy. So he put through a lot of the reforms that Kennedy would have hesitated to put through, particularly around civil rights.
The civil rights reform.
Yeah. So
Well, I mean,
anyway,
there's people like you and I that we have to stand up. We're responsible for paying attention to this.
And it's surprising. I mean, admittedly, I live in a, as it were, fairly liberal part of Texas, but I can see why they're so busy and trying so hard to redistrict, because Texas, with its which has attracted a lot more people in artificial intelligence and electronics and so on, has actually become more liberal. And as a result, the big cities are probably a lot more reluctant to put Republicans in than they were. And certainly in this part of Texas, I mean, you don't really need to deal with a sort of crazy Trumper. Although, I mean, I've got friends who supported Trump or voted for Trump, and because they thought we needed, I don't know what they thought we needed, but we're scared by
lower egg prices.
Well, yes, I think, to be honest, I think that people, ordinary working people were worried that they were going to not be able to afford to put a decent meal on the table and that sort of thing. I mean, a lot of people I knew were. I don't think it was crazy of them, because it was happening. But Trump and his colleagues exploited that, and I think we were already on the cusp of seeing a turn in that, just more or less automatically. And what Trump's done is actually sustain the problems that he was talking about getting rid of, when they were already getting rid of the problems before he ever came along. So it's very sad to see that, I mean, I've been writing this kind of book all my life, where people are swayed by fear, and people are very quickly, turned into scurrying mice. Unfortunately, it does happen. I mean, they just start to get scared at the drop of a hat, and then that's exploited as the likes of Hitler and Mussolini exploited it in the 30s, and suddenly you see the whole balance tipping, when in fact nobody has done anything to mess things up. I'm certainly not all the people of different gender persuasions and and different beliefs and all that. Just hasn't happened. I mean, all that did happen was that people became calmer and more civilized and more understanding of one another. And people, for some reason, some people are scared of that, are scared of people becoming more humane. So, you know, it's always been a problem, but you know, I'm old, as I say, I'm old enough to see it probably turning again, you know, and I think it'll get bad with Trump. I think things will get worse with Trump, but they will eventually, the pendulum will swing back to a more civilized way of.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to a couple of people. You know, I'm a student of history. I've studied history, and I tell everyone that it's kind of a weird cycle. There's a sexual revolution going on right now, like in the 60s and 70s, and there's also like there's a whole political cycle that's happening kind of like back then as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're just gonna have to, you know, we'll get through the other side of it, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you, if you have any updates on the Elric and Conan comic book, or any updates?
I haven't really had a chance, because I was finishing off you know, the novel The Wounds of Albion. Then I'm also finishing off the Albino series, and
Oh yeah, I wanted to ask you about the Wounds of Albion. So yeah,
that's I don't know when it's coming out. I can't. They've.
Is it done? Is it 100% complete?
Oh yes, it's done. It was delivered. The completed, wholly finished book was delivered about 2 months ago. It turned out that my English agent, or my agents, had forgotten to send it to the publisher. So I've been wondering what, you know, what and where and when and so on, and they hadn't even decided on an editor at that point, because they didn't know they had the book. But so I think probably the Albino, and the next Albino book will be out before The Wounds of Albion now, just simply because it's, well, in England at any rate, it's got the same publishers, and it might not happen here, where Tor are doing the Wounds of Albion, and Simon and Schuster are doing the Albino series. So for all I know, they'll bring it out at the same time, which is never necessarily a bad thing. So we'll see what happens. But I've got a huge amount of stuff coming out at the moment. These things sometimes happen, you know, where you've been working hard, you know, doing a lot of work, and then you look around and you wonder, well, where is it? You know, where's the result? And I mean, this has happened more than once with me, where I don't know if I ever told you this story, but with the Coram books, for instance, I was writing them for a publisher called Quartet in England, and I got the first royalty statement, and for the trilogy, and the royalty statement was fine for the first 2 books, but for the 3rd book it said zero sales. I thought, well, this can't be. You can't sell nothing, and so we, myself and my agent, sort of got in touch with the publisher, and they said, yes, we were surprised at that. You know, and then they went into it and they discovered they'd forgotten to publish the book. They'd actually forgotten to put it out. So they were publishing a 0 royalty statement. And I hadn't known they hadn't put it out either, which will give you some idea. I mean, this is when you put out a lot of, you know, you write a lot of books, you can get into that state where you actually lose track of the books that you're
well, I'd have to, outside of Elric, Coram are my absolute favorite, and Hawkmoon, but Coram. Yeah, those.
Yeah, I like Coram too, and but I really hadn't known that it was not. Another time, I looked at my bank balance, which in those days was really the only thing I went by. You know, I had no clear idea of my income at all, and my bank balance was getting low, and I thought, that's weird. You know, it should be all right. You know, judging by the work I've done and so on and so forth. Anyway, so I phoned the publisher, and and I phoned him up and I said, "Is that Malcolm?" He said, "Yes." He said, "I'm really sorry, Mike. I'm so sorry. We're putting it right immediately." I said, What's the matter?" He said, "Well, we haven't paid you for the past year." And I didn't know. I had no. I mean, and so it turned out that the books, I just hadn't been getting paid for them, and but I hadn't known about it. I had no track of what was going on. I just all I do is I sit there and write the books. Anyway, now I have a much sterner bookkeeper in Linda, and she looks after these things considerably better. For a long time, I was sort of exploited. I wasn't getting. I had the chief rep of my English publisher come up to me one day and he said, "You must be rolling in it, mate. Because they know how many books you sell." And I said, "Well, not really. I'm doing all right. I'm not complaining." And he said, "Well, he said you ought to look at your royalty statements." He said, "Because you should be." He said, "They're just falling off the shelves. They're hotcakes, all that stuff." Turned out that I'd not been paid by the publisher any royalties for something like, it's very close to 10 years.
Oh my God.
I just hadn't known it, because I've just, that.
Well, you got all that back pay. You got it all back, right?
No, I didn't, because it's why I didn't write films as much as I was asked to do, because I could, on an advance, I could spend the time writing another book, which I wanted to do. I've never been a reluctant writer, as it were. I've just got books, stories I want to tell, and books I want to write. And so it was more important for me to write more books than it was to spend my time involved with lawyers over getting back royalties. And I've always been like that. Well, as you know, with Dungeons and Dragons, both Fritz Leiber and myself, we both gave them to them. We never thought there was, we never thought about money. And then with Chaosium, the same thing. And then Chaosium sued Dungeons and Dragons, and over well, I suppose primarily over the income, and never occurred to us to ask for money. Because we came out of a time when fantasy fiction was not very well paid. It didn't, there was a very small group of people who were interested in it. And so you get into a mindset where you really don't expect to be earning that much, These days, I'm astonished by how much I earn, and could have been earning. But whether it would have made any difference, I don't know. I would have gone on, writing the books, same. I also had two wives on the same bank account, which Linda was horrified to discover when I left, when I broke up with them, so I had no real idea of how much money I was spending either. It turned out I was spending. It was costing quite a lot of money, and I just let them, let them have the money, and so I suppose until, well, for about half my life, my writing life, until about 1980 anyway, I had absolutely no idea of how much I was earning as a writer or as a musician, for that matter. I just didn't think about it, and I gave quite a lot away to people. People who needed it. If I had it, everybody got a share, as it were, and so and that really was an old-fashioned way of existing. I mean, it wasn't just me
Sure.
that was like that. We looked after one another. I mean, one Christmas, for instance, I didn't have any groceries. I mean, I didn't have enough at that point. I didn't have any anything for Christmas. And I told Brian Aldis, I said, the checks haven't come in. I mean, that's really how you thought of it. And one day, about 3 or 4 days before Christmas, there was a knock at the door. I opened the door, there's nobody there, but on the mat in front of me was a huge box of Christmas groceries. And those were from Brian. And other writer friends of mine were in the same position, and I did the same with them. We were much more of a, I suppose, a relatively small, a
community. You guys were
there weren't so many of us. It wasn't such a big thing, and we just, I'm sure it was like that in the gaming world as well, early on, where people were, well, just a tight-knit group, if you like, who cared for one another.
Well, now a lot of people are very interested in your creations. And we've chatted about it a little bit before, but I know that there was some interest in a show called like an Eternal Champion show. Is there any news about that?
No, there isn't. The last I heard, they were thinking of doing it as an animated program, and I didn't mind that. There's some very good animated stuff around these days, and I can see it actually being better than a live action. And that's what they're working on at the moment, but I've had no news about it. I think most stuff's a bit too complicated for the average producer to understand it. It's the way that Marvel have, in my view, misused the multiverse idea to simplify it and just use it as an excuse to write the same story, slightly altered by saying it's in a different universe, that sort of thing. Whereas to me, it's a much more complex and unified idea that has its own rules and possibilities. And they don't really think like that. They just think of how they can tell the same story, and within a slightly different way.
Well, I wanted to
just a question with that. With the multiverse, was that an idea that evolved, or was there a moment or an event that
there was a moment? Yeah, it was in a book. I wrote it in 61 or 2, I think, and I've always said it was a reaction to the Big Bang Theory, which at that point was just catching on as a notion, and the ultimate idea of the Big Bang Theory was that entropy would just continue until everything was gas and then cease to exist, pretty much, and that's not an idea that most people like, and so. In reaction to that, and myself and just me, I think, in terms of writers, but 1 or 2 scientists, mathematicians, astrophysicists, began to conceive of the idea of the multiverse, which meant that we didn't all come to nothing, as it were, that there could be repetition and new renewal, and I think it's almost a religious idea. I mean, it's certainly a metaphysical idea coming into physics. So yeah, I mean that I came up with the idea in a story called The Sundered Worlds in Science Fantasy magazine. In 62, I think it appeared. And although other writers, H.G. Wells, for instance, had conceived of alternate universes, other Earths, as it were, and Sprague de Camp had done some great stuff with other going into other mythological universes, that sort of thing. I was the first person to have a character who could sense the multiverse, standing back from the multiverse, as it were, and seeing it as an actual construct. Murray Leinster had done a thing called Outside the Universe I think in the 30s. So it was, the notion that there might be other universes had been around since, say, at least 1900. But, and I hadn't read those at the time. So I did come up with it, as it were, fresh, but I think I came up with it in reaction. And as I say, it was almost a religious response, in reaction to the idea of entropy being our final destiny, as it were. I didn't like that idea at all, and a lot of people didn't. So that's when I think there's a guy called David Daitches, maybe, who was at Cambridge. And he came up with the idea of a multiverse almost exactly the same time as I did. But he was sort of laughed off the stage, as it were, at that time. There was quite a lot of stuff going on at Cambridge at that time that was revolutionary in terms of ideas, different sorts of ideas, economics, all sorts of things. And so he had to deal with people just saying, it's nonsense, go away and redo the math or whatever, that sort of thing. And whereas as a science fiction writer, people were happy with me doing that sort of idea. So I had the opposite response from my audience. And somebody asked him fairly recently, a few years ago, had he read my story, The Sundered Worlds, David. And he said no, he hadn't, but he could see how I would have come up with the same idea around the same time. It's one of those things where everybody invents the airplane at the same time, and the guy is lucky enough to make the first powered flight or the first telephone call or whatever it is, gets the credit. I mean, deserved credit, but there's also a lot of other people around who are moving towards the same result.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't had a chance to do it, and I've been thinking about doing this, but we'll have to dedicate one, episode to talking about the multiverse and all of that, like kind of do a deep dive into it and, the origin of it and how it all started. We'll have to do that the next time.
Well, I mean, I was doing that, as you know, for years before the comics hit upon it or came across it. I even did a multiverse comic for DC long before either DC or Marvel used the term. It's just been reprinted by Titan. It's called Michael Moorcock's Multiverse. It's pretty simple, and it took them a long time before they decided with their sticky little fingers to pinch that particular idea. But generally speaking, comics, although you can get really good original comics, I think Alan Moore does some great comics, but or did, he's not doing them anymore. But I think comics pretty much run on ideas that are first started by regular science fiction writers or regular writers. I mean, even Superman, there was a Superman story before there was a Superman character. I forget, but it's in the history of Superman who first came up with it. I used to know the name of the author. I still must know it. Anyway, and the term multiverse had been used before.
You mean Nietzsche?
No, not Nietzsche. No. This was oh um,
I
oh
only
well,
know like Man
I
or
won't waste
Superman.
time trying to wrap up.
Yeah.
It's no, not that. That is another idea, but this was a novel about a
Oh,
Superman. I think it was O.F. Stapleton might have been the writer,
I see. I see.
um,
Okay.
and um, you know he well he wasn't a particularly good novelist, but he was a very good ideas guy, Stapleton. And so not a lot of people read him because he could be a bit boring, but he did have the ideas. And I think that
Hmm.
the guys who came up with Superman pretty much credited him with with the first idea of the Superman,
Hmm.
and it was considered a superhuman being at the time, of course, that had evolved out of out of out of the human race. But DC had it, and again, there were quite a lot of science fiction stories around which had super human beings coming from other parts of the universe to Earth. So I don't think and the number of Batmen there were in fiction. There's an encyclopedia of popular fiction by a friend of mine whose name has just gone out of my head again. I am getting terribly old. Um, anyway, and
No,
he
we all
writes.
have those moments, believe me.
Well, yeah, I guess so. But mine are getting a
Uh,
little more frequent than they should. But anyway, um, uh, Joss. He's an academic here in Texas, I think at Sam Bass University, which I think is in San Antonio. No, not San Antonio, San Jose. Anyway, um, he's written an encyclopedia of popular culture, and I think you probably, and I'm pretty sure. I mean, I've read this bit. It's a huge encyclopedia, and the number of Batmen or man bats or that those variations is
mm,
just huge. I mean, I've got um, I've got stories going back at least to 1900 where a Batman has is terrorizing the neighborhood or
right.
is terrorizing the criminal fraternity or whatever's going on. So and all these things have their roots in I mean, I think a lot of high culture has its roots in popular culture. And I once said I could imagine James Joyce reading a copy of a comic,
Excuse me.
when he was at school in I don't know when it would have been. I mean, let's say the 1890s. There's so James Joyce is sort of reading a comic inside a school book and gets the idea
Sure.
for Ulysses. I mean, it does happen. People have a rather snobbish notion of popular and so-called high culture, and the two really are pretty inseparable, and often one will influence the other, and it isn't. It's quite often it's popular culture which influences um, high culture. So anyway, there it is. I won't waffle on
Well,
about.
I know we're coming up against Linda's hour. She says I try to honor that. She wants to
Yeah,
try to
I
continue.
do too. Yeah. Um,
What I mean, did you have any last words out there for your fans?
Last words. I don't like the idea of that. I, that
Until the next interview, we'll do
yes,
another
until
one,
the
and
next interview. Until the next
until the
interview.
next
Well, I mean,
interview.
look out for the Lemmy for the Motorhead. I was afraid that I wouldn't do it justice, and
I'm excited. I'm really excited.
well, and I was surprised. I mean, when I heard it played back, I did it here at home, and an engineer came out here to record it. There's a guy
Hmm.
I worked with before from Austin, and he's very good. And so he then sent all the recorded stuff to Alan, who then put it together. And so, but if you're just doing it straight into a room with no actual music, it can sound pretty terrible to you. And Linda was astonished when she heard it. Actually heard the recorded version, because all she'd heard was me yelling Motorhead every so often.
I've been there, man. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway,
you're screaming into the void.
That's right. Yeah. Anyway, as I say, it was a surprise to some of my friends that I could
I can't wait to hear
adopt
it.
up to sort of a metal persona. But I'd always done that a bit with Hawkwind anyway. You know, I'd done some pretty shouty, screamy, you know, stuff for Hawkwind in the past, and I enjoy doing it. I mean, I find it, you know, I'm very lucky in that I have a very wide range, you know, and so I can sing sort of melodically as well as shout out a, you know, a heavy line.
Belt it out.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Anyway,
I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, look out for Albino's Secret. I think it's a lot of fun. It's, you know, there's nothing profound about it, but it's a good adventure story, and I hope your viewers enjoy it.
Fun is the key, right?
Yep, absolutely, and that's what I've been trying to do. The last book, The Winds of Albion, I should say, is actually not a dystopia. I got so sick of dystopias coming out that this is a utopian ending. It's not the first utopia I've done, but
I love it.
I'm doing it.
I can't.
You know, it's got a good happy ending to it.
I can't wait to read
it's
it.
It's the end of the Eternal Champion sequence as well. It's the final volume in that long series. So
I can't wait to read it. I'm very excited about
the Eternal Champion becomes a happy man at the end.
Well, I love happy endings. I'm the same way. So I'm very excited to read it.
Right.
All right. Well, I just have one last thing to say, and I just wanted to end the show by saying I dedicated this show to all of my old friends at RPG Central, especially my dear friend Jeff Francis, who recently passed away. Also, the Knights of the Prime Material Plane, the Dreaming City Fellowship, my little sister Lisa, and my soulmate Wendy. Also, remember, look to the stars, carry that torch of enlightenment, and strive to be a disciple of rock and roll in the Brotherhood of Orpheus.
Good stuff.
Peace.
Yep. Peace and love to you too. Nothing wrong with it. Cheers.
Right on. Right on.